Hi, and welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'll be talking to you about some simple techniques you can use to improve drawing eyes. I'll start off the video by showing you a few things in Photoshop before jumping over to the drawing table to kind of walk you through the process of improving your skills on drawing eyes. And with that being said, let's head on over into Photoshop. So welcome back. Here we are in Photoshop, and I wanted to kind of talk you through some practical observations based on drawing the eye. And so the shape you see on the screen here is kind of the shape that we've all kind of drawn growing up as artists. The kind of almond shape with the circular iris shape for the eye. And while it's not the worst thing in the world, because it does take a certain level of observation to realize that the eyes have a almond-like shape and that the iris is a circle, this is a great starting point. But by just making a few adjustments and making some key observations, we can turn this very, very basic drawing into a more dynamic and sophisticated representation of the eye. So as we begin using our observation skills to create a better representation of the eye in our drawings, you're going to realize that the iris, the round circular part of the eye, in a large majority of the situations will not be represented as a complete circle. What I mean is that either the top eyelid or the lower eyelid will intersect part of that circle and cut part of it off, so that in most cases you will not see a complete circle as the iris in your drawing. Now, there are a few exceptions. The two exceptions, which I'll illustrate later, are in an eye that's excited, and there may be a case where there's a medical condition where someone's eye may bulge a little more and you'll see the complete circle. And probably the other case would probably be Nope, those are probably the two. I was going to say that when somebody's looking up, but when somebody's looking up, you'll see only one part of the circle of the iris being cut off by the lid. Or if somebody's looking down, then the bottom part of the circle will be cut off. But generally speaking, there will always be a part of the circular part of the iris cut off in your sketches. So let me jump into a quick demonstration on what I was talking about. So I'm going to lower the opacity of the basic eye shape that I have. And so here's, if we start off with the iris, I am going to draw the upper lid, which will intersect a portion of the top of my iris, like so. And then generally speaking, the intersection to the bottom of the iris will not be as great. So now all of a sudden, if I erase the portion that I intersected, we now have a more realistic representation of a basic eye shape. Okay, so I know some of you are out there like, yeah, Mike, you out here just playing, man. I've always drawn my eyes with the football shape in the full circle, and that's how I do it, and that's how I've always done it. Well, I'm not making stuff up. So let me show you some actual examples of eyes, and you can see it for yourself. No pun intended with the C. So here's the basic shape that we started with at the very beginning of how a lot of people learn how to draw eyes and the full circle of the iris. And so, as we know with anatomy, our eyeball sits inside the skull, and then the folds of the skin kind of wrap around the eye to form the eyelids, and your eyes will blink and open and close. And so, this is the eye here. And so if you can imagine, there is your eyelids that will come over the top of your eye like so. And then you'll end up with something like that, as the skin of the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid close and open, so you can open and close your eyes, obviously. But on a more practical, not practical, but here's a more common example of what I'm talking about. So you have an eye, you have the iris, and you see how this lid takes off or covers a majority of the iris, and then the lower lid on this particular example just touches the bottom of the iris. So you're not seeing the whole circular shape in this particular person's eye. So let's talk through another one. So we have this eye here. Same thing. You have the iris of the eye, and then you have the upper lid that takes a large chunk of the iris shape out of the equation, and then the lower lid touches the bottom of the iris. Now, as a person's eye moves, if they're looking down, obviously more of the top will be revealed and less of the lower of the iris will be cut off. More of the lower part of the iris will be cut off. Here's another example. Iris shape, top lid, lower lid touches the bottom, and it's not a full circle. Another one here. Same thing, upper lid, lower lid. So you can see the difference between what's happening over here versus what's happening in reality. Here's a person that's, a senior citizen, or older person's eye, where you can see that gravity starting to pull the bottom lid down, so you're almost seeing the whole bottom of the iris there, but still there's still a nice portion of the upper iris that's getting cut off. And as far as the example of seeing the whole iris, an excited eye where somebody's like surprised, birthday party, watching a horror movie, their eye is open as wide as possible. So you're seeing the whole thing. You're seeing the whole thing. And in that situation, draw a circle. But then the actual shape of the eye will not be as almond shape. It'll be more of a pod shape, with more distance here, top to bottom, to allow you to see the whole iris. And then the last example would be, and you're still not seeing the whole thing, but I talked about this earlier, that you can see the whole bottom or top if somebody's looking up or down. And so you got the top lid cutting off part of the top of the iris, and then the lower lid is just there. So I hope that makes sense. So let's jump on over to the drawing table and we can start putting together some sketches of how to approach just drawing the eye from the beginning. Welcome back to the drawing table, and we are continuing this series on drawing the human eye. And here are the materials we'll be using. As usual, an eraser, a pencil sharpener, and our white 8.5 by 11 copier paper. And I'm orientating the paper in landscape position to accommodate the proportion of the eye as we continue the lesson. So before I get started, let's quickly talk about the anatomy of the eye. Put together this quick little drawing to kind of show you the parts of the eye. So we have the tear duct right here, which sits in the inner corner of the eye. We have the pupil here, which is the dark center portion of the eye. And depending on how much light is shining on the eye, if there's a lot of light shining in your eye, the pupil will be smaller. But if your eye is in shadow and in darkness, the pupil will be bigger. And then we have the iris of the eye, which is the part where your eye color is shown right here. And then we have the lower lid, the upper lid, the brow ridge, and then your eyebrow. So those are the parts of the eye that we'll be discussing as I show you how to create a human eye. Okay, so step one in creating or drawing the human eye is to draw the iris. And the iris is a circular shape. So you want to draw a circle as best you can. And the tip I have for drawing circles is to not draw with your wrist like so, trying to draw a circle, for instance, like this, because it takes way too many strokes to get a circular shape. Now, it can be done, but do you see the difference between this approach versus locking your wrist and using your whole arm and shoulder to draw a circle? So we have essentially this kind of just using your wrist and a whole lot of strokes versus locking your wrist and using your whole arm and shoulder to get that nice circular shape. Okay, so that's tip number one. But the first thing we want to do is get a circle for the iris and then another inner circle for the pupil. So you may want to take a sheet of paper and just practice locking your wrist and using your arm to try to draw some nice circle shapes. And it's also a good warm-up to kind of get loose and ready to draw. And so I'll start with another fresh piece of paper as we move forward, but that's kind of the one thing I wanted to show you prior to kind of jumping in, to lock your wrist and use your whole arm and shoulder to draw circles. Okay, so we're back. Fresh sheet of paper. We're going to start off by drawing the iris of the eye, circular shape. So like I said, locking the wrist, using your arm, maybe hover above the paper before making the mark to kind of get the circular motion kind of locked in, and then just kind of lightly just draw that circle. And then we're going to draw another circle inside of that circle for the pupil. Keep in mind, we're going to clean this up before we move into any kind of shading. So if you have some stray kind of sketch marks or repetitive strokes around your circles, that's fine because we'll clean that up. And so going back to what I said in the Photoshop demonstration, when you look at a human eye, either the upper lid, for the majority, 90% of the time, will intersect the circle of the iris. So we want to start on one side and draw a nice smooth line across that cuts through part of the top of the iris over to the other side. And that will be our upper lid. Now I'm going to keep this very, very basic. Now everybody's eye shape is different. So lots of times the highest point in the upper lid sits just to the left of the intersection of where the upper lid and the iris intersect. So actually I'm going to erase this and restrike that line. Because like I said, lots of times, put that back in, lots of times the highest point of the upper lid is to the left of this intersection, and then it starts headed back down. So you have more of this kind of shape. So from there, we will come over to where the tear duct is, make a little line straight down, and then we'll strike the line for the lower lid. And like I was pointing out in the Photoshop demonstration, that lots of times there's less of an intersection on the bottom of the pupil. So we will only take probably a little sliver of the bottom of the iris out and then connect to the other side. Like so. So now you have the beginning of your eye shape with the iris and the pupil, and then we'll come in and we'll go ahead and erase the top part of the pupil that's cut off and the lower part of the pupil that's cut off. So you end up with something like that. And so then what we can also do is draw the tear duct in, which sits in the inner corner of the eye. And depending on your reference or the eye that you're creating, the amount of tear duct visible can be very little or a whole lot. So just keep that in mind when sketching this out. Okay, so continuing on, we're going to add the upper eyelid. And so the thing that defines the upper eyelid is the line that runs across over the top of the eye. Now, depending on the individual you're looking at, this line could be very close to the eye. It could be higher up on the eye, so, because some people have very prominent and very large eyelids, based on the way their eyes sit into the skull. And lots of times female tend to have larger lids on top. But that's not always the case. I mean, there's males with a lot of lid on the top. So it's very, very depending on the person or the reference that you're using. So for this demonstration, I'll create a somewhat large eyelid for the upper, like so. And then the same with the lower lid. Some people have very prominent lower lids, and some people have very, very, very shallow, or meaning distance between the bottom of the eye and the lid itself. So it's all dependent on what reference you're using or the kind of look you want to achieve. So then the other thing we want to draw in is the brow ridge. And the brow ridge sometimes intersects the upper lid line. So like I was showing you in my demonstration here, I had the brow ridge line intersect where the upper lid crossed over the brow, under the brow ridge. So you didn't see the whole line of the upper eyelid because the brow ridge intersected that. So we'll kind of do the same thing here. Is I'll take a line here and I'll intersect it so that it cuts off a part of the upper eyelid line. And we'll just erase that out like so. And then the final thing that we'll draw in for our eye is the eyebrow. Now, the eyebrows come in all kinds of shapes and sizes and thicknesses. Some people, male or female, they tweeze their brows to shape them. Some people just let them go so they're really thick and full of character. So it's really up to the reference that you're using here. So I'll just keep it simple, and generally speaking, the beginning or the inner brow will be just slightly further left of where the tear duct is here. And I'll just keep it kind of very generic for the sake of this demonstration. And it goes across and over, and it has an arc. And like I said, there's no rules to like how thick or thin these are. It's purely based on what you're looking at, because some people have pieces of their brows that don't grow in full. So it's all about what your reference is dictating at this point. But for the sake of this demonstration, I'll keep it very kind of generic, just to kind of show you. And that's it. That's really how you can add more life to your drawing of your human eyes, by making sure that you account for the intersecting upper lid and lower lid instead of just having the football shape with the circle and not accounting for that intersection. It gives your eyes more lifelike qualities. So we'll continue on. I'll talk about adding value and shading to the human eye. Okay, as we move into shading our human eye, let me talk about how we're going to approach this. So the anatomy of the eye tells us that this portion of the eye surrounding the eye, the inner top corner, is concave. So we're going to want to add some shadow here. Obviously, the pupil will be a darker shade. And depending on if you're just practicing like me without really having a reference to look at, you can kind of decide how big or small you want this. But the bigger this is, that meaning less light in the eye, then that means more of your eye shading should reflect that. meaning that a lot more parts of your eye should be in shadow. The smaller this pupil is, meaning there's more light on the eye, then that means there should be more light and highlighted spots in your shading of your eye. So the corners of the eye on both sides will have more shadow in them because we're dealing with a spherical shape, and it's covered with your eyelids. So there'll be a level of shadow along the top, below the top of the eyelid, that will show the viewer that the eyeball itself is sitting behind the eyelids. And for the eyelid below, lots of times the shadow will be on the left side of the lower lid, because the way the cheekbone sits forward of the eye pocket, lots of times light from the top or light from around the face will hit this cheekbone. And lots of times when you look at photos, you see a very bright highlight in the cheekbone area because it tends to face upward and catch a lot of light. And then that reflective light will hit this lower lid on this side, meaning it'll shine light on this side. So, meaning this side of the lower eyelid will be in shadow. So that's the way we're going to approach this. And also the other thing is I have this generic shape for the eyebrow. And what I usually do is create a light outline shape of the eyebrow based on the reference. And then what I do is then I look at the direction of the eyebrow hairs as I start finalizing that, and I draw those in the direction that they're going. And then I start erasing out the outline guide to kind of give it a more natural look. So I'll come in here and I'll lighten up some of these lines with the eraser before I start going in. And again, I'll probably be using my very thin, and like I said in my previous videos, go pretty light at the beginning with these because they're not as forgiving as a regular pencil when it comes to erasing. And then I'll slowly build it up. So I'll start off showing you kind of blocking in the shadows and the value, and then I'll probably speed up the video and you'll see me kind of finish it off. And again, if you have any questions along the way, just drop a comment and I'll be glad to answer those questions for you. Let's get started. So here you can see that I have my first value pass. I'm kind of just slowly building up value in the areas we talked about before. Darker in this area. Obviously, the pupil is going to be probably the darkest of the darks. And One other thing I forgot to mention is that if you're drawing dark brown eyes, obviously this is going to be more overall darker tone, and you may, just depending on how strong the light is, you may see the pupil still be the darkest value, but it'll be very, very subtle because the overall eye being dark brown will take the majority of the dark value. So this is kind of where I stand after the first value pass, like I said. And now I'll just come back in and I'll start taking it to the next level and start punching up some sharper lines and adding a little more detail as we move forward. So as we progress along with the slow buildup of value on our eye, we want to add some subtle detail to the iris. We're going to add some subtle lines radiating from the center of the pupil to kind of give you a little bit more realistic look to the eye. As if you look at an iris really closely, somebody's eye color, you can see lines that radiate from the center of the pupil in a burst-like fashion. So we'll add that along. And then we'll also add the bottom edge of the eyelid, a detail there to kind of add a little more realism to this eye moving forward. So as you can see, our human eye is now starting to look more and more lifelike as I add more and more detail to it. I added the burst of subtle radiant lines coming from the center of the pupil inside the iris. And I also added kind of the inside edge of the lower lid, because lots of times based on the angle in which you're viewing the eye, you may see a little peak of that inner part of the lower eyelid. So I'll continue to build this out and finish it on, and you'll see me come back in, like I said initially, that I'll add stroke direction of hairs in the eyebrows, and we'll take it from there. So if you have any questions or any comments, any tips that can help me improve, or you got a question on anything, feel free to drop a comment in the comment section below. So as you begin finalizing your sketch, you want to now finish this off by drawing lines to depict the eyelashes. And the way to do that is you want to start at the edge of the upper lid and draw lines that convey the natural lashes and their orientation along the eye's contour. So you want to take a sharp pencil, I'm using a very thin, and create strokes that start at the eyelid edge and form a natural motion depicting the direction of the eyelid. And you want to use a sharp pencil because you want to just kind of start depicting these lines along the edge in kind of the natural flow of the way they flow away from the lid. And then on the bottom, the same thing. Along the edge, the ones on the bottom tend to be thinner and less populated than the top. And then once you understand the pattern of your eyelashes, then you can continue to fill them in accordingly based on your reference, or if you're not using a reference, until you think you have the look and the feel you're going for. Thanks for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more videos like this one, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing my channel. It will help my channel grow. I hope that you will find the information I share with you very, very useful, and that you will continue to practice your drawing skills. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye for now.